Hmm. You okay, Ruby? Let me invite some people. Thanks for everybody showing up here. Oops. Hello. Not quite yet. Sorry about that. If you were invited up. Good evening, everybody. I'm just sending out some invites to other folks. All right. Oops. I think I sent some invites to come up to people in the chat. Sorry about that. There we go. Good evening, everybody. How you doing so far? We're getting a lot of people coming in. Hopefully, plenty. If you could be so kind, if you can see some other people doing it now, tapping the live. Somebody says, "How am I since I left?" I didn't really leave. I've taken my schedule back a little bit. I'm doing okay, Beaver. Hope you're doing well. I did a live earlier today. There was a live on SoCal Smitty that I was watching, and then Smitty's live had to come down because people reported him, which I think is just so childish. People reported us. Hey Sheila, how you doing? So if you could be so kind, if you could share the live with others. When I first started the live, I went through all my friends, and if you don't know how to do that, all you have to do is touch the screen for like a half a second and all of your friends will pop up. And little red thing says invite. Just tap those invites and hopefully more people will come in. And I was split on what I wanted to talk about tonight because obviously there's a thing with the TikTok ban. That's newsworthy. We got the silly port the U.S. is building. That's newsworthy. But we also have some people that are just, I don't know if you've seen these videos floating around, building these underground bunkers, which is something I want to talk about as well. And then probably on Saturday, we're going to talk about some of the control mechanisms, like social credit scores, central bank digital currencies, stuff like that. So, but it's always fun to get into a conversation with guests who disagree. So we may have that happen. We'll see what goes on. Give a few seconds for people to filter in. Good evening. Thank you for sharing the live, Karzarma. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, when you share the video, it shows your name coming up here. So please, if you don't mind, I know it's kind of a pain in the neck to have to do it. Whenever I go into somebody's live, the first thing I do is I like it like 100 times by tapping on the person's face, and then I share the live with my other contacts. User 1625572528810. I said it all the way. Trump's going to win. LOL. I agree with you. I think Trump's going to win. No LOL though. I don't think it's funny. I think it's both candidates have serious drawbacks. Obviously, that's the problem with America. You never get a good choice. You get bad and worse. But I do agree that Donald Trump's going to be the next president, barring some unforeseen event like he dies. But I believe he's going to get elected. Now, it's possible that whatever shenanigans can go on in the election process could potentially change that. That's unforeseen. Now, listen, I think saying, and by the way, do me a favor, user 162, just try to keep, just no all caps, please. You can keep it in lowercase, please. I'll even send you a message. No all caps, please. Somebody says our Lord, he said our Lord, our Savior, Donald Trump. I think that's pushing it a little bit. It's okay. I think right now, and listen, both people have bad qualities. Jumanji asked, you said bad or worse. Who is the worst in your opinion and why? Well, for different reasons, either person has different attributes, but I'll be clear on the one thing that matters most to me, and I think should matter most to everybody, and that's avoiding World War III. Because that's going to involve nuclear weapons, and that's going to mean everybody dies. So I want whoever is the least likely to cause that. Now, I know that's a very low bar to set for a president, But I believe, again, I could be wrong, but I'm just trying to call balls and strikes as best I can, like I always try to do. I believe that Joe Biden, or whoever his successor, if somebody else replaces him, is the lesser choice for preventing conflict. Why do I say that? Because look what's happened with Biden in office. We have the Ukraine war, and we have this war between Israel and Gaza. Now, you may say, well, it's not Biden's fault that Russia attacked, and it's not Biden's fault that the H group attacked Israel. You could make that claim, and there may be some truth to that. But believe it or not, diplomacy and the way you interact with foreign leaders makes a huge difference in what they choose to do. And I think with what the Biden administration did was it arrogantly dismissed the Russian leadership and basically told them to go to hell. And were unwilling to resolve the situation peacefully. And as we know from every situation involving conflict, if you don't allow for a political solution, you guarantee a military interaction, at least usually. So I can't blame it all on the Biden administration, but I will say this. People like Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin and Jake Sullivan and even Joe Biden, these are not top-notch people. The people from the Russian side are way better. That's just indisputable. That Sergei Lavrov, Vladimir Putin, others, they're just shrewder, smarter, more measured, more diplomatic human beings than the U.S. It's like having a varsity football team take on an NFL team. And obviously it'd just be absurd. And I think that's the nature of U.S. diplomacy versus almost any foreign adversary right now, China included. And by the way, there's a whole process to vilify Russia and China. I was watching, the Sean Ryan podcast. He has a lot of interesting guests, but he had somebody on who was a Navy SEAL veteran who was just railing on China point after point. I'm like, it has no basis in reality. There's no indication that the Chinese want to have conflict with the United States. Now, granted, they run a very repressive regime. I would not want to live under that regime with, the way information is managed, people kept track of, and you have WeChat and all the internet is censored, although we're catching up quickly, obviously. I wouldn't want to live under that. But I understand that they have a different society than we have, and they have different priorities. There are societies, believe it or not, that value the collective more than the individual. I know that's anathema to what we're taught in the West, but everything has its pros and cons. But I would argue that, look what China's done. What they've accomplished is indisputable. There is no Uyghur Holocaust absolutist. That's Western propaganda. Just so you know. Go to places like the Gray Zone. You can find that out. There is no Uyghur massacre, Uyghur Holocaust. That's all bullshit. Do I think Putin is more diplomatic? I think he's a way more measured, calm, and shrewd politician than the entire Biden administration and the last 10 administrations put together in the United States. Nobody's perfect. He's got drawbacks too. He's a tough guy, does some pretty tough things to stay in power, obviously. I don't like that. But I do admire the way that he carries himself. I don't have to agree with everything he does to admire how he operates. And if you watch how he interacts with the political process, he's much more adroit, much more capable than any of the U.S. officials. He gets along with many more people than the U.S. does. So again, I know this sounds anathema to what Americans are taught. We're all taught to hate Vladimir Putin. We're taught that the North Koreans are the enemy. We're taught that anybody who doesn't work with the American way is the enemy. But just like what you've probably learned about Gaza, I don't know if you're somebody who's learned more about the Israel-Palestine issue by virtue of what's happened since the 7th. If you do some deep digging and you really study the history of these people, you'll find differences between what you've heard and now what you discover when you do that work. So I admire Vladimir Putin. I'm not his friend. I'm not for Russia. But I admire the way he has tried to handle the interests of his country way more than the way the United States and the Western leadership has. The West is just flat out sad. It's just, again, trying to defend the indefensible in many cases, just like Israel does. Ukraine is a Western colonial project with no right to exist. Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say that the efforts inside of Ukraine have been orchestrated by the Western powers, most specifically the United States, towards the end of trying to destabilize Russia. And if you look at the interests of the strategic military and geopolitical interests and economic interests of the Western powers, it makes sense they'd want to do that for their interests. But the difference is it's not defensive in nature. Russia does what they do to defend their country. The US and NATO allies do what they can to take from other countries. That's a big difference. Yeah, somebody here says Mr. Addy, I'm not sure what you say there, says that Putin didn't want NATO on his doorstep. Of course, the U.S. wouldn't want to have a Chinese military alliance in southern Canada. It wouldn't even be discussed. It wouldn't even be allowed to even get anywhere near there. And yet, the United States was arming Ukraine in the terms of tens of billions of dollars leading up to the 2022 invasion, and just ignoring Russia. Like, who cares? We don't care what they say. Well, as they say, FAFO, F around, find out. Well, they found out. Robin Bly asks, is Congress banning TikTok? That's a great question, Robin. So there was a bill in Congress, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure you probably heard of this, but just in case, there was a bill floating around that was first passed by the Senate, then it went to the House, and it was approved, and Joe Biden says he'll sign it. Now, it's not like they're going to immediately cancel TikTok. The way the bill is written is the parent company of TikTok is a company that is Chinese owned called ByteDance. And most of the stuff in the Chinese economy is quasi-state. It's state and privately owned, sometimes more or less of the one or the other. It gives ByteDance, the parent company that owns TikTok, up to 180 days to divest their ownership interest in TikTok. So basically, they're forcing the company to sell their product, TikTok, to some other entity that's friendly to U.S. interests by 180 days, or the app will be banned. So it's not going to happen right away, although the legislation was, agreed upon, and presumably Biden will sign it. So the question is, what will they do? And my guess is, because of the money involved, they're probably going to get a huge premium under the circumstances to sell it. They'll sell the app to some interest. Somebody said today on TikTok, I don't know if it's accurate or not, that it's going to be sold to an Israeli-owned or Zionist-owned conglomerate. I don't know if that's true or not, but obviously, if you put more and more of these entities in the hands of people who can suppress information, it's not good for the public. And who knows, maybe the very things that people have been trying to do to limit the reach of different content creators, or strike down their videos, or whatever they've been doing, all this silliness. Maybe they'll get their way by changing the ownership of ByteDance, and then they can do a lot more of it. Somebody says Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank is going to buy it. I don't think Kevin O'Leary has that kind of money. Although he'll probably tell you he does. Yeah, and the other thing is, listen, let's face it, TikTok has a massive user base. I mean, it's 700 plus million people. 170 million people in the United States. And I think it's over almost 2 billion worldwide, or 1.6 billion or something. It's a huge reach. The app has a massive reach, and other platforms just don't have that. And so, listen, it has a lot of power because of that, right? And with the TikTok shop being developed, it's a perceived threat to Amazon and other online retailers. And because of its reach and the simplicity of just, you've seen the ads when you scroll through, it's people showing these rotatable stands and different products. And it's very easy just to purchase them through the app. It's really simple and easy, and that's a threat. So it's usually sometimes some things are not just one or the other. It can be both and. And so I think that the reasoning behind this is both economic and security, as far as information management, propaganda, etc. Why don't they sell us the share? The U.S. Congress wants it all out of the hands of ByteDance. And I think that's where the economic part comes in, because investors want to gobble up the shares of ownership of what it will be, and they want some of the profits, in addition to wanting to control the flow of information. They're using the flow of information as a guise. They already required TikTok to put its servers in Texas under Oracle, the company Oracle. But that wasn't enough for the Congress. So whoever's pushing this train has decided that ByteDance can no longer own TikTok, which is a pretty crummy thing to do. I don't think it's going to be taken offline in the United States. There's just too much money involved. But I don't know what the changes are going to be. I mean, maybe this type of feature right here is going to go away. It could, or maybe it's going to be much stricter in terms of what's it allowed, the algorithm. I'm not sure. But it is a very popular app, and so I don't think it's going to go away. It would be very, very, very unlikely that it's going to go away. So we'll see. I don't think YouTube's behind all this. That's Google, by the way. Google owns YouTube. I think it's a combination of a group of investors, greedy investors, as well as the national security state/media apparatus that wants to control everything. And remember, they have a pretty good in with all the domestically owned companies. Facebook, which owns Instagram, of course, and Google, which owns YouTube and Gmail and stuff like that. They have a direct connection with those companies. Apple, they can pretty much require those guys to do a lot of things because they have direct control over their corporations through the United States government. They can make life very difficult for them if they don't work with them. But ByteDance, they don't have that leverage, right? So if you don't have leverage over a foreign government as far as how they run the thing, you want total control, which is what they want. I don't think it's about making Zuckerberg more popular. I don't think that's the case. Those guys don't really care about that. They care about money. Somebody says here, go to Twitter, Rumble, or after the TikTok ban. I agree that Rumble, and if you don't know what Rumble is a competitor to YouTube. It's very similarly situated, just owned by a different company. And of course, Twitter is one place to go, X, where there's a little more latitude. Actually, Telegram is where a lot of people end up because some people get banned from Twitter, from Rumble, from everything. Like Nick Fuentes is a good example. And I don't believe in banning people. I don't care how horrible the things they say. If they're disagreeable, I think free speech should be absolute. I mean, within reason. If you're going to say, go to Jane's house at this address and, do something really horrible to her, I think that should be dealt with. You shouldn't be able to do stuff like that. But short of calling for violence or giving people's personal information out, I think everything else should be fair game. I hate it when people automatically cancel people because they think they disagree with them. I can't stand that. Almost always. If you listen, Nick Fuentes is probably a very controversial guy. If you don't know who Nick Fuentes is, he's a very strong sort of Christian nationalist guy. And he says a lot of things that upset people because he believes in the family. He believes that women shouldn't go to college, which, I don't agree with that. But that's what Nick thinks. And he says some things about other groups that people find objectionable. They think he's anti-Semitic. I don't think he is, but he said things that I can see why people would say that. And they think that he's discriminating against minorities. I think that Nick just wants things to be the way Nick wants them to be. But I will tell you this, for example, why do I listen to a guy named Nick once in a while? Because he's incredibly smart. I don't agree with Ben Shapiro, but I think Ben's smart. I don't think he's stupid. So on some subjects, I'll listen to Ben Shapiro because I'm interested to hear what he has to say. I think he's a quick thinker. And on some things, I'll listen to Nick because I think he's an interesting thinker too. He knows a lot about political history. He's only like 24 years old. And he's incredible. I mean, I'm just amazed by the guy's knowledge. And he's a good communicator. I don't agree with a lot of what he agrees with, but think of it this way. No one's going to agree with everything that you and I agree with because then they would be you and I, right? That's absurd. So I don't know. I would imagine that guys like Nick Fuentes and Stu Peters and Gavin McInnes are sort of alt-right type figures, if you will, more so than they are mainstream. And again, I think the more you open your mind up and just literally just listen to everything people say and just don't put any precondition on it, I think it's better that way for us as learning people because somebody may say something that has absolute validity, but they're marginalized because people say, I don't like A and B, so I'm not going to listen to C, D, E, F, and G because this person's a bad person. That's not how I think. And people have said that about me for different things. That's just not how I work, but everybody has to choose their way. What do I think about Brother Nathaniel? I don't know La Compisa. I don't know what that means. My eyes are piercing. My ears are about to be pierced, I think, if I don't get some help. Now, I don't know about my eyes being piercing. I'm just trying to talk to the camera. I don't know who Brother Nathaniel is. Somebody asked, did I serve in the Army? Yeah, I served in the U.S. Army back from 1989 to 1992. I was in the 3rd Armor Division, which is Army speak for tanks. And we got deployed from Germany, where I was my duty station, to the first Gulf War, which was the war against the Saddam Hussein invasion of Kuwait. Probably before many people here listening were alive. But, I'll tell you this from having been deployed in a combat zone. I never thought I would do that. I had a scholarship in college, and it was part of my service commitment. And then here I am in a war. And it's scary to go to war. You don't know if you're going to live or die. But once you're there, you have to kind of do what you got to do to survive, right? There's no you can't worry about it there. You're already there. So, but what you see in war is a lot, and it's not good. And I don't envy any of the Israeli soldiers or the H group fighters. It's like, it just does something to you. It's kind of indescribable. It's just not good. It's not good anyway. Violence at that level. And the crazy part is all of this manufacturing that goes on with the war material and stuff, it's all geared towards killing people. We could spend a lot more money on just figuring out ways to get along. We could have people that go to therapy, for example. But no, we spend it on weapons because it makes a lot of money. We do a lot of things in this country, in the United States, just for money. I'll give you an example, which is really silly. Somebody asked me what am I doing, or am I doing Ramadan? I don't practice Islam. I don't practice any formal religion. So no, I'm not doing Ramadan. I'm very respectful of it. And I admire those who fast from sun up to sunset. It takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of sacrifice. So tip of the cap to those who are doing that, who are observing Ramadan. I know it's an important part of life for many people who observe Islam. But, as far as our country goes, we have a healthcare system, if you want to call it that. It's a sick care system because people are not shown ways to prevent problems. We don't have preventative healthcare. We have, whatever healthcare, meaning that people are pushed to eat all sorts of food, processed food, fast food. It's pretty much anything goes, right? Whatever tastes good, you just eat it. And a lot of that crap tastes good. They spend tons and tons of time in laboratories with scientists trying to figure out exactly what combination of sugar, fat, and salt will make you eat more of this stuff. And then they sell it at crazy prices versus the commodity. You can take an ear of corn and it costs next to nothing, but you turn it into corn chips and now you have a very profitable high ticket item that's not good for people. It's got preservatives, it's got chemicals, it's just not real food. Real food is what comes off the land. Like, something grows on a stalk, that's food. Something eats that thing on the stalk and then you eat that's food. But all this other stuff is not food. It's processed bullshit. And people eat that stuff for 10, 15, 20, 30 years and they get sick. Now, the food makes money for food companies. And then the medical care from the drug companies and the surgeons and the hospitals, they make money. It doesn't make money to prevent bad health. That's the sickness of capitalism in certain elements of society. Think about that for a second. So there's nothing preventative. The emphasis is not on healthy, well-balanced, organic foods. Our foods are sprayed with all sorts of pesticides that are banned everywhere except the United States. Where I live, the management company in my apartment complex, they spray the grass lawn with chemicals. It's called True Lawn. It used to be called Chem Lawn. It's all sorts of toxic shit. I can't even go outside and ground my feet on the grass. I have to go somewhere else where they don't spray these chemicals. That's indicative of life in the United States. It is toxic soup, digital dystopian future. Now, there's a lot of good things about here. I'm not trying to be negative, but I'm just saying some of the shit that flies here doesn't fly elsewhere. Most countries have some interest in protecting their population. Here in America, I could give a shit. They want you to live just long enough to pay the bills and make money, but not well. They want you to limp along and be sick, so you need all the monetary assistance to provide money for corporations. That's it. Why do they spray the grass? Because it makes the grass grow more fully. It knocks out the weeds and stuff like that. which I could give a shit about, but it makes the lawn look thicker and cleaner and like more vibrant. But it's terrible. It's birds die, insects die from its poison, basically. And it's not allowed in other countries. You go to Europe, they won't let you spray your lawn with chemicals. That shit's banned. Like 100, there's like 300 or 400 different things that are allowed to be used in the food system and other products in the United States that are all banned in the European Union. 100%. So in fact, where I live, there's so much lead in the ground that you can't even grow your own crops in the ground because they'll just take a bunch of lead up, and when you eat it, you're going to get brain damage. You have to literally make raised beds, and you have to add your own soil, and then you can grow stuff. How sick is that? Same thing with the streams. I take my dog to a local dog park. All of our waterways are polluted with very harsh chemicals and pharmaceuticals. The wastewater that comes out of our homes, people take so many pharmaceutical drugs here that they find large amounts of pharmaceutical drugs in the wastewater that goes to these products, and it makes it through. It doesn't get filtered out. So the water that we drink from the tap has other people's drugs in it they've been taking. Somebody says, am I against fries? I'm not against anything per se. I try not to eat as much fried food because I don't think it's that good for us. But everything can be had here and there with no impact, right? But if you talk about McDonald's fries, the company that by the way, their stock had a big fall today, for those of you who don't know, which is good. But if you don't know about McDonald's food in general, but their fries, you can literally sit their fries in one of their burgers with the bun and sit it under a little like cake lid for like 30 years. It just, nothing happens. It doesn't change. It doesn't break down. And if I don't know about you, if I know it tastes good, but I don't want to put food in my body that doesn't change with time. That's not natural, right? There's nothing good about that. So again, we're all told the advertising on television is all geared towards consumption of everything. You got to have the next new iPhone after a year because the old one doesn't have the fancy camera or whatever. And the same thing with food. We have, during like the Super Bowl, we have ads for Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, McDonald's, Burger King, all these consume. We're told to be a good consumer. In fact, they actually call us. We're not people. We're not citizens. We're consumers. I hate when people say that. I hate that term, but that's America. So I think there's plenty of good here. There's plenty of nice people. The place is beautiful, the continent. But the systems that are in place, I think, need a rework. I think the systems that motivate and that run everything need to be re-engineered in a way that looks back at the society and not at making money for a small cadre at the top of society. I think that would be the right thing to do. And I think something like that will happen eventually because people are only going to put up with this bullshit for so long. And it's either going to happen under the weight of our own implosion because we're way in debt, and who knows if there's going to be a conflict of some type that causes this to happen. Probably likely, maybe some of both. But eventually we'll get back to living some saner version of life than the one we're in right now. It's not good. Speaking of not good, this is another thing I want to talk about tonight. So speaking of World War III, I don't know for sure if it's coming. It's certainly possible with what we're seeing. But if there is an attack, obviously a nuclear attack is unthinkably horrific. But I've been watching videos on TikTok of people showing their bunkers. And there are companies that build these bunkers for people. They make them in a warehouse, like these big round cylinders that are like a living space. You can literally dig the dirt up and stick in the ground and then put concrete on top of it. People are building and spending a lot of money on these bunkers just in case, like an insurance policy. I mean, think of how messed up your way of life has to be for you to have the thought, much less the action, to build something 20 feet underground so you can survive whatever bullshit might happen. Think how crazy that is. And yet that's modern America. Wealthy people are building both bunkers and getaways, or whatever, and they're spending a ton of money on it. But even people like regular people, quote unquote, that aren't like ultra millionaires, are still doing it. I saw some videos today about it. I was just, it just struck me as like, I mean, they're kind of cool to look at, right? It's kind of interesting to see the living arrangements underground, like what would they have to deal with, stuff like that. So, I mean, they're nicely done, but that shit shouldn't be necessary. What in the effing flying, you know what? Why should that be something that we have to do? That shows you how incredibly insane our system is. It's absolutely insane. Like, we've lost our minds. We have weapons that could destroy everything on the planet like 20 times over. Our governments, I know it takes us one mistake of one country misperceiving something on the other side or not communicating properly, and within 7 to 10 minutes, it's all in the air. And just so you know, the Russians, and this is just the truth, if I was talking about Vladimir Putin earlier, and you can love the guy or hate the guy, but he's not incompetent. He's not incompetent. And so what he has done is he has modernized the Russian, what they call the triad. It's air, sea, and land-based delivery systems. And they, by far, have the upper hand when it comes to an exchange. Not that everybody won't eventually be, it's insane to even think of that. But I'm saying if the U.S. thinks it's somehow going to release whatever it's going to release and it's not going to come back, you're crazy. America is an overrated military, and those systems that are unthinkable in terms of their use. We have a false sense of we're the best because we're America. It's got to be the best, but it's not. And if anything like this ever pops off, it's goodbye everybody. If you're in the United States, kiss your ass goodbye. So I think it's important to have leaders that don't so cavalierly approach these issues with countries that are armed with these weapon systems, and don't push them and prod them so much, but show them a little respect. Show them that they matter to you, that you're concerned about their future, their security. Make it a two-way street, not a one-way rules-based order, which basically means that we're going to make the rules, everybody's got to follow them, or else. And that's why you're seeing this BRICS thing take place, this emergence of this alternative foreign alliance. And if you are on the receiving end of poor financial outcomes and poor military, groups, why would you not want to have your own group to push back against that bullshit? If someone's going to disrespect you and print money and not be very conciliatory or peaceful, why wouldn't you? And I think that arrogance and that hubris that is part of the United States government, and especially the Israeli government, it lies at the root of all these problems. Other countries are not nearly as arrogant and so cavalier with how they throw their weight around. And eventually when you do that stuff, you get kind of careless, kind of cautious, you get overconfident, and somebody sends you a message that's hard to forget. And I would say I'm an American citizen. I've lived here my whole life, other than the time I served overseas in the military. And this is a tough thing to hear. But I agree, even for myself, I'm putting myself in this, that we Americans are allowing, whether we want to think it's this way or not, we're allowing these governments to do what they're doing. We're not rising up against them. I'm not saying that would be easy. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. But I'm saying that we're letting it be. It's going on. It's persisting. Let's put it that way. And if somebody else sees our country, I'm sure they don't hate the people, but is it fair to say that we as citizens who support this machine, whether we like it or not, we're still not stopping it, that if something does come our way, we all are equally culpable. We're not maybe at fault, but it's sort of all our responsibility to kind of try to deal with this nightmare that's coming about. And the fact that we're not doing more than just acquiescing to go into the polls and voting, that if we do get some sort of retribution for our government's actions, that it's probably, I don't want to say well-deserved, but it's not unexpected. And it wouldn't be unfair for somebody like me to have a cruise missile land on my head and I die because of what our government's doing. And I certainly don't want to see that happen. I don't want to be hit. I don't want you to be hit with a cruise missile or anybody else for that matter. But it's hard to claim innocence when this has been going on and building. And if you don't know about it, people should know about it. Because what the United States has been doing for a long time is projecting its power in ways that is, probably worse than we're seeing a lot of horrible things in Gaza, right? You're probably horrified. If you knew the totality of what the American empire has done since, 1925, you'd be way horrified. And it didn't even start then, but especially after World War II. The amount of death and destruction and chaos that the US government has sown around the world is unthinkably awful. So, it's fair for somebody from Israel to point back at us and say, what about you guys? Yeah, it's fair. So there's a great author. If you don't know many of the things I'm talking about, you can read up on it. But Michael Parenti, P-A-R, like the word parent with an I on the end, Michael Parenti. And if you want to know more about the economics of this, how this sort of game is played with using that as a lever against people, is Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. That's a great book to understand that part of it. That's what the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, International Finance Corporation, all those quote unquote deals they strike around the world to help develop other countries. You can learn a lot about that stuff. But it all goes together. It's sort of like industry and militarism and state interest. They're all intertwined. And one or all is always in play, usually all in places like Iraq. And remember, you usually hear a story to justify whatever these militarism activities are going to be, these military adventures. So we heard about weapons of mass destruction, right? That justified the invasion of Iraq. But we found that it was all bullshit. And most of us who, at the time, I was, as a former officer, has been in combat, as this whole case was being made to go to war with Iraq, I was telling anybody who would listen, hey, this is bullshit. This is 100% an excuse to go to war and take the energy and disrupt another Middle Eastern country. But no one will listen. Everyone was like, no, you're wrong, man. This is a danger. My own uncle, for Christ's sakes, who's a very wealthy guy up in New York. We were going to a family wedding. This is like early 2003. And he's like, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're going to see over time that this is the right thing for us to do. And I'm like, no, you're out of your mind. And sure enough, we saw what happened. Somebody says, was I in Vietnam? No, I was born in 1967. So for me to go to Vietnam, I would have been like 7 or 8 years old by the end of it. So no, I did not go to Vietnam. But boy, I must look pretty old tonight. Damn, sorry about that. I'll take my Geritol. How about that? I'll take the Geritol. Yeah, I'm 50. I'm 56, going on 57 shortly here. I'll be turning 57 shortly. So, in my 6th decade of this madness here. But again, people who are pro-American will say, well, if you're not happy about it, why don't you leave? I'm very privileged to live here, and I appreciate all the benefits of living in the United States. Let's face it, I'm white, middle class, upper middle class kind of person of privilege, as people will say. And with that comes a lot of ease of living. I mean, in fairness, that's what it is, right? I mean, some people in this country have more advantages than others. I'm among some of the people with more advantage. I got a head start in a lot of ways. So that criticism is fair as well. But there are also a lot of things going on, as much as I get to enjoy the benefits of what's going on. If you have a conscience, you look at what's going on and you say, do I really deserve this stuff? I mean, I'm living in a situation where we have benefits that we earn through doing horrible things to others. That's why I'm critical of Israel. I mean, hopefully Israelis don't want to have something at the expense of others. I don't. And, I've thought about leaving. Quite frankly, I would love to. Not that I hate the country, not that I don't want to stay in and be around, the community that I come to know and love. But just because it's more congruent with the things that I believe. And I think staying somewhere eventually where you're not proud of it, once you learn what you learn, it's probably the right thing to do, right? Just pull away from it and don't be a part of the benefits that come from it. But those benefits are changing quickly. As those of us who live in the United States, we kind of get a feel that things are just sort of sliding rapidly in the wrong direction. Yeah, somebody just said it's not your fault Israel has dirt on America. Yeah, it could be. It could be that the politicians and the decision makers who are furthering these various policies, which are not good for the United States, that are good for Israel, are done because of something that's being held over people. I think that's probably there. I think sometimes it's just the donations and the general political climate, and maybe other things that people are stuck with no way out because of what would be exposed. But either way, whatever it's attributable to, it's noticeable, right? And it's pervasive. And it seems like the U.S. and the Western world is sort of under the spell of the pro-Israel mindset, and that's the nicest way to put it. And when you try to point that out, the fact that you're called all sorts of vilified, you're vilified as a name. Oh, you're saying that. No, I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm just saying that look at the policies. Look at the people in government, look at the people in industry, and look at the policies. And what other conclusion would one draw? Is it an accident by chance? Or is there something really, some sort of glue that ties things together in some ways? I like to listen to people like Lucas Gage. If you don't know who Lucas Gage is, he's somebody who's had he's been on Rumble, he's been on YouTube, he's been on Twitter. He got his Twitter account suspended for 90 days. But, he is somebody who has sort of been very vociferously pointing this stuff out for a long time, and he's marginalized horribly for it. Which I think is unfair, because I've never heard him say anything disparaging about Jewish people. Not once. But again, criticism of Israel or of Zionism and the role that it plays in all the stuff we're talking about is then conflated with Judaism or being Jewish ethnically. And then because you criticize any of it, you're deemed to be a bad person. Yeah, Scott Ritter, if you don't follow Scott Ritter, he was one of the people speaking out against the weapons of mass destruction. He went and testified in Congress because he was a former UN weapons inspector. I think he knew a thing about it. And his point to the Congress was, no, it's not happening. It's not something we need to go to war over. There's no policy to develop a nuclear weapon or other biological entities. They didn't have it. He had been there. But nope, Joe Biden dressed him down and said, who are you? What the hell do you know, kid? When he was a senator. Look that up. Look up Joe Biden, Scott Ritter, 2003 Iraq War, whatever. And you'll see the hearing where Biden, the arrogant, smug, just prick that Biden is, even though he seems more calm as an older guy now, he is a real piece of work if you watch him from his younger days. And people don't change, by the way. He's just physically more subdued than he was before. But I listen to people like Scott Ritter, Colonel Douglas McGregor, different people from the military intelligence and from the CIA, ex people like Larry Johnson, Ray McGovern, people that have been in government but are now out of it, so they're no longer accountable to the politics, and they have no reason to lie. Somebody says, am I subdued too? I guess I may be. I don't know. That's a fun question, though. Thank you for asking that. So there are a lot of concerns on the horizon, the biggest of which, and this is why I talk about Diane Sare. If you don't know who Diane Sare is, she's somebody who I've sort of tried to help promote for this independent Senate race in New York, in the state of New York, is that we need people in power who are willing to talk sanity to some of these leaders about don't be so cavalier with these other nations that are armed with nuclear weapons. I mean, it's just not smart. And we need people in power who are peace-oriented, who want to cooperate rather than be confrontational with others. I can't say that strongly enough. We need people that are willing to look towards the common good and not try to, get over on somebody. It's sometimes cooperation is your best bet. And by telling foreign leaders you won't talk to them, Trump got criticized ruthlessly for this. That he went to North Korea to talk to Kim Jong-un. I commend him for doing it. This whole idea that people have to do something first to meet our desires, our demands, until we'll give them the privilege of talking. Who the hell are you to say that? Ultimately what you want is peace. Whatever gets us to a place that's more peaceful, I'm all for that, whatever that may be. Not all this pomp and circumstance and all this, other bullshit that people talk about. Yeah, user, again, try to keep the all caps down, please. I agree. I was talking earlier about Trump. I didn't finish my thoughts. Somebody says, who do I think is better or, less worse and why? I think Trump is a better choice for safety and security of the country. And it's argued the opposite. They say, oh, with Trump in charge, we're going to be that much closer. He has some smarts on him. He's not a complete dumbass. And when it comes to interacting with people directly, he's way better than Biden. He's way better than Blinken. And yes, he does garner respect of other leaders. He's got a certain presence about him, whether you like him or not. In those types of settings, he's used to negotiating deals. He's used to sitting down and having friendly but firm types of conversations. And you can say that's a joke, but how many new wars started when Donald Trump was in office? The answer is 0. Now, he maintained the U.S. presence in Syria, and he also ordered the assassination of Soleimani, the Iranian general. So you can argue that, but no new major conflicts. Unlike Biden, we've had the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we've had the response to the October 7th attacks by the H group against Israel, both of which have been total disasters in terms of loss of life and instability, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think Donald Trump is going to save America. I don't think he's going to make America better, all this other crap that people say. I think that's a joke. But that's the story he spins to his followers. And if you don't know, if you believe that Donald Trump really cares about the working class, just know that when he went and used the bankruptcy laws when he built his casinos, he stiffed thousands and thousands and thousands of contractors who had done work on his properties, the working class, and walked away without paying them a dime. Do you admire that? And yes, he was using the bankruptcy laws to his advantage as a business guy, but in the process, he stiffed working class people horrifically so. People lost their companies, they lost their businesses, they had to lay off their employees. That's not the kind of person I want to have in power, but you don't have much choice nowadays in terms of who you choose from. The point is, there's always pros and cons with every person and every candidate. There's always something you can say that's good, other things you can criticize. I'll give you a criticism of Donald Trump. I don't know if you've heard about the train derailment that took place in eastern Ohio. East Palestine was the area that was affected. And it was a Norfolk Southern shipment of chemicals that was traveling through this small town. And the train derailed. And the reason the train derailed is because the braking systems that were installed were inadequate for the time it had to brake. And newer regulations that were in place under the Obama administration got scuttled by the Trump administration. So that Norfolk Southern, for a lot of its rail cars, didn't have to put in these advanced braking systems. And the inspection process that was required at a certain number per week or per month was skipped and pushed back. So deregulation, which is what Trump ran on, more business, less silly regulations. Well, it turns out not every regulation is silly. And people, their homes and their land and their people are dying from cancer. That's a direct result of Donald Trump's policies when he took over. And you may say, well, whatever, but what if you live there? What if you had to look someone in the eye whose daughter or whose dog got cancer and died? Would you say whatever to them? Well, if you would, that makes you a pretty lousy dude or woman. So these things have real impacts. These policies have real impacts on people's lives. Donald Trump is a very pro-business guy, but being pro-business has drawbacks. And if you expect someone who puts the head of a coal company at the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Scott Pruitt, you're out of your mind. These people aren't going to do the right thing. They're not going to regulate industry. They're going to let everything go, as they did. So there is no, good person, so to speak, to have in office. They're all cut from the same basic cloth of the high net worth class, the corporate collusion, the national security state, all that stuff. It's all tied in at the highest levels. No one can change that stuff directly. No one president. And if you try to, guess what happens? If you really put pressure on those groups, what do you think happens to you? So I would say keep your hopes very, very low. Your expectations should be tempered dramatically when it comes to what you expect out of the next 4, 8, 10, 15 years. Because no candidate in Senate, Congress, president, dog catcher is going to just dramatically move the needle for the working class. Now, things will get better for the wealthy. So if you're somebody who has $100 million, you're looking pretty good either way. But, when people say I can't vote blue or I can't vote red, I can't, that you're fooling yourself. You're missing the point. It's irrelevant because all the wealthy do is they write checks to both. They fund super PACs for both. They can do it with dark money. You think Goldman Sachs cares who's president? They give money to both sides. And then after they're done, they pay these huge speaking fees as a reward. Hillary Clinton went to, Goldman Sachs. They'd given her a ton of money to run her campaign. And when she lost, she went and did $150,000 per speech, lasted an hour. Not a bad gig, but Obama's been doing it like crazy. This is how it works. So we've been misled to believe that we have a choice, that our vote matters, that we can go to the polls, we can change things. People say, I'm not going to vote for Biden. I'm going to show Biden because he went along with this genocide. I'm going to not give him my vote. They don't give a shit about your vote. They could care less. Ooh, scare me. They don't care. The wealthy class in this country, they don't care if Biden gets elected. They don't care if Trump gets elected. They're going to get the same goodies either way. They don't care. And this whole idea, this fallacy, this fantasy that you can study somebody's positions and they have to earn your vote. It's all bullshit. Other people control the real decisions that go on. The people that get into office are the implementers of those decisions. Now, I'm not saying don't vote because, like I said before, I support Diane Sare. Anytime you can get somebody into the quote unquote, the sandbox that will say good things and put pressure on people, at least put it out there in the media and let the public be aware, that's a good thing. And let's face it, people who make it into the Senate and the Congress, they have a platform, they have a voice to some extent. So it's always better to have better people than not in terms of, whatever matters to you. But any major changes with taxes, the economy, national security, state, most issues that matter to corporations, forget about it. Not changing. And that may be discouraging to you. Like, what do I do if I can't vote? I've heard people say that. Well, gosh, what are we supposed to do, man? If that doesn't work, what are we left to do? I've talked about it at length. Most people don't want to hear the answer. Everybody wants the quick and easy. Go pull a lever, go home, and someone else is going to fix shit. Right? The savior complex. Well, bad news. No one is coming to save the American public. Nobody can. Because the current system pushes forward things that are the antithesis of what benefits the average person. So it doesn't matter which parts or players you stick into that machine. It's like trying to turn a Yugo into a Mercedes by replacing the parts in the Yugo. If you're driving a Yugo and you have a fantasy about buying a better rear view mirror, and it's not going to make a Mercedes. You got to trash the Yugo and get the Mercedes, right? Why buy the parts? The parts are the politicians and the voting. So there are tools that people have. Let's go through them quickly. I don't want to make the whole tonight about this. I've talked about it at length. But obviously people have their purchasing power. We're seeing some people use that as leverage with the BDS movement, boycott, divest, sanction with Israel, and also people not buying things, Starbucks, McDonald's. We talked about this, Disney and others. Those that contribute money to Israel. You can avoid products made in Israel. I did some barcode comparisons with that a while back. You can decide, personal decision, not recommending it. You can decide not to remit federal taxes if you're angry about where your money is being spent. Now, they're printing money more so than they're using the money that's collected in tax receipts. So it really doesn't matter either way. They're going to print whatever money they have to print to do what they want to do. You have your labor. We have our labor. We may work somewhere. You may work in the state government. You may work in a corporation. You may work for a nonprofit. But all these entities depend upon labor to function. to some degree or another. Now, they're trying to change that by using automation and AI, and they'll do that as much and as fast as they can, but they still depend at the end of the day on humans for most of these businesses. So that's one thing that people have. There's way more of us humans that are on the other side of this little club. And so one of the impacts we can have on the members of the club is to say, hey, we're not coming to work, pal. You keep doing this stupid shit, we're not coming to work. In fact, not only are we not coming to work, and I saw this today at one of the airports. I don't remember which airport it was. Maybe it was, I don't know, I'll remember where it was. But it was one of the major airports in the United States. A bunch of Palestinian protesters shut down one of the entire wings of the airport terminals, like the part you go down to all the different airlines, just cut it off. So that's an example of what's called nonviolent civil disobedience. But I would argue that to make it effective, all they did in this case was they rerouted passengers to other gates, other terminals. So they still made their flights. That delayed some flights, which is a pain in the ass and gets the word out. But what if they blocked every terminal? And not just that one airport, but at 140 airports nationwide. And every shipping terminal, the port, water, access to the sea. And every highway, and every beltway, and every city hall. Everything just froze. That would make a difference. So you withhold your labor, you go out and block shit so the wheels of commerce aren't moving. And then you have a set of demands that have to be met. You're like just like a bunch of union workers that strike against a company. You'd have some demands, right, that you're trying to work out with the other side, which is the management. In this case, is this power structure. The only way to change the system is by using the tools that the system that matter most to the players in that system, which is money and power. And if they don't have your labor, you're blocking shit, you're not paying taxes, you're not buying shit, they got a problem. But it's got to be at a broad enough scale for it to make enough of an impact to matter. If you have 1%, 2%, 0.5% of people doing it, it's like whatever. You just bring in other people, they clear you out, whatever. But if 15 or 20% of a 330 million person population does it, that's a big difference. Now, I've talked about this with other political, people on TikTok and elsewhere, and they always make snide comments like, come on back home, let's come back to Earth, Mr. Dreamer, let's come back to Earth. Well, you can make those kind of comments if you want to, but the point is, it may not ever happen because it's unlikely, and I think that's why they say that. It's not likely to happen. But it doesn't mean that's not what's necessary to achieve a goal such as to make changes in these systems the way they need to be made. Because trust me, people who have power aren't going to give it up voluntarily. You're not going to ask nicely. And they're going to say, you know what, you're right. We really should have fair tax policy. We should pay 23%, not 8%. Right? Not going to happen. Somebody says, how much are you getting paid to open your mouth like this? Well, Jan, that's making the assumption that I'm being paid. If you'd like to be the first, I'm more than happy to work out an arrangement with you. In fact, we could start with, let's say, $1,000. Would that be good for you, Jan? But no, believe it or not, Jan, I know this may be hard for you to understand because your comment was a little bit snide. Some people do stuff in the world, Jan, because they care. Because they really think that trying to look at these things honestly and discuss them publicly with people and share ideas is more important than money. So I could turn it around on you and say, how much money are you being paid to come into my comments and say stupid shit? But I'm not going to say that. But the answer to you is I'm not being paid to say any of what I say. I am an independent thinker and I try to do my best to share information. You can disagree. In fact, if you do disagree and you think there's a better path to get this done, I'm all ears because I would love to hear it. Because really all that matters is the ends, right? I don't care about the means. This is just a suggestion or throwing ideas out of what the means might have to be. But if there's an easier, more effective way to do it that leads to less problems and less friction, then let's do it. Let's talk about it. I've thought about this long and hard for a long time, because I've seen it developing. It's been happening since the 80s. Had a lot of time to think about it. And every time my mind comes back to these same cornerstone issues, and that we're not going to be able to go to the polls and change this thing from within the system that's being controlled by the people who don't want it to change. I mean, let's take Jan, for example. Jan's going to vote for either the Democrat or the Republican, most likely. And she probably feels strongly one way or the other that what she believes in is right and the other people are wrong. And so she goes and casts her vote for the down ballot issues, which is like your local elections. Then you got your congressional election or your senator and then the president. And Jan feels good. And maybe she's part of a state where her votes are part of the majority. Let's say it's a blue state, for example, California or whatever. So she knows she's, supporting the right cause. Democrats, yes, vote blue. Not those evil Republicans, those selfish, business-oriented Christian whack jobs who love Trump. Okay, well, let's say that's what Jan does. And then what about a month later? Someone gets inaugurated. And then what happens? More of the same stuff. More of the same. All the promises, all the statements publicly, all the things we're going to do, blah, 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 blah. We hear it every single time. Promises, promises, promises. Words are cheap. Actions is what matters. Nothing substantive happens. So Jan goes, gee, those Republicans really are bad people for holding up all the great stuff our Democrats want to do, right? That's what people like Jan do. And they watch MSNBC and they vilify people who watch Fox and they go about their day and it's always about the other people being wrong. And where does that get us? Nowhere. So I hope that clarifies for you, Jan. That's why I say what I say, not because I don't want to see, I want to see things get better for people, not worse. And I think more of the same is going to lead to worse outcomes. We're moving in that direction as it is. And by the way, if you're for Trump, same thing, no different. It's the same exact thing, just flip the script. You can blame the Democrats. They won't let the policies go through. That we want to build the wall, they won't fund it or whatever. It's all a big game. Don't you see? The Democrats aren't ineffective. They're playing a role within a system where they say they're trying to do A, B, and C, but they never do, right? They never seem to get it done, right? They can't get universal health care done, right? Just can't get it done. It's on purpose. They don't lose because they're incompetent. They lose because it's what the system, it's like watching pro wrestling. Why does Hulk Hogan always win? It's all orchestrated. So no, I'm not getting paid, just so you know. And if I were getting paid, and by the way, TikTok does pay something for these lives, by the way. I mean, I should be truthful. I might get a message afterwards that says, congratulations, you earned $3.07. Sometimes it's like 4 cents. I'm not kidding you. I have all the messages they send me. I mean, I don't know about you, but doing 2 hours work for 4 cents, it's slightly under minimum wage. So anyway, I do this because I have a passion for it. And I like politics. I think it's interesting. I think I have an interesting background and life path. I don't have it all right. No one has a monopoly on the truth, right? People just have their take. I have my take. I respect other people's takes. But if you disagree with my take, Jan, come on up here and let me know where I got it wrong. I mean, I'd like to learn from you, quite frankly, because if there's something that will facilitate the changes that will make life better, and it's not as hard as the things I'm laying out there, let's do it. 100%. In fact, I'll even turn the mic over to you. You can have the 115,000 followers and you can take the ball and run with it. I'd be happy to have that happen. I just want to see it done. So we do have a guest in the queue. I've talked a lot more than usual tonight. Brenda, how are you doing? Long time no see. It's been about, 4 hours, 5 hours?
Hey, Chip. How's it going? Just having dinner.
And it shows that you're kind of pausing to get in, Brenda. You might want to try leaving TikTok and coming back. That usually fixes it.
You can't hear me?
Sometimes that goes for anybody else. If you request and if you're not able to get in, it's not that I'm canceling you, although it seems that way. Because sometimes you can see yourself, but on my end, you're not coming through. So usually what fixes that is if you actually close the TikTok app and then reopen it and then come back in, it'll usually fix that problem. But I'm serious. If there's somebody here who is opposed to the things I'm saying, which is no problem at all. I mean, if you've ever followed me before, you know that when people come on the live, especially those who I disagree with, I treat them with respect. I let them say what they want to say. I try to listen to them thoughtfully and repeat back what they said. And then I try to have a respectful dialogue. I think that TikTok needs as more of that than less of that. Let's put it that way. No, I was an Army officer. Somebody says, I was a Navy officer. Nope, I was an Army officer. Served in the first Gulf War. Okay, I think Brenda's coming back in. Let's see if this works. See if the second time is the charm.
Hey, Chip. Can you hear me?
It may be doing the same thing, Brenda. I don't know if
It
you can
is.
hear me, but it's
Yeah.
still timing out on my end. And so what I do in the past, I've actually gone through and changed my airplane mode and then
Can
put it
anyone
back
in the
on, same
audience
thing,
hear
and
me?
then come back. That may be what's required. And if that doesn't work, you can throw your phone out the window. No, I'm kidding, of course. Somebody says they can hear Brenda. So Brenda, they can hear you, but you're not getting through on my end. So it's kind of hard for me to have a dialogue with a guest if I can't hear them, obviously. So for the audience who can hear Brenda, that happens sometimes where the TikTok live, the guest can come on, the audience can hear the guest, but the host can't. And what happens on my end is there's a little thing that just keeps going around a circle like this. So that's why I share with Brenda. And sometimes the only way to fix that is to end the live if it's a TikTok problem. Somebody can translate through the talk. It's going to be a little lengthy, I guess. Yeah, we can talk about that. But yeah, getting back to the bunker thing, though, it just blows my mind that people are spending, 10, 20, 30, 50,000 on up to build an underground bunker in case the world goes to hell. You're not going to survive a nuclear fallout. You might survive for a little bit, but the sun doesn't shine well enough to grow crops. Every living animal who eats plant matter dies. And then any of the animals that you want to eat for your meal or plant matter, they're not around, and then you die. But you can have food stored up for like 6 months or something like that. But if there's nuclear attacks, all the electrical systems are gone. So you can't grow stuff in your basement with lights. Just so you know, you can have solar panels, but there's not enough sunlight to make the panels charge. There's just no easy. I've thought about it. There's no easy way out of nuclear conflict. You'd be lucky enough to die in the first hit because the rest of it's going to be horrific. It's just suffering. So let's see if Brenda's back in. See if this gets her up on this time. See if it works.
Hey, Tib, can you hear me? The audience hear me?
Not crossing my fingers on this.
If you can hear me in the audience, can you write that in the
Tibet has been under the control of China for a long time. Yeah.
I don't think
All right,
Tib
Brenda,
can hear
for some
me.
reason it's not working. Will somebody else please try coming up as a guest other than Brenda? Because I know you can hear her. I get it. Just for the audience, when a guest comes up on a host live, a box will appear, and then it starts to do this until they connect, like a little circle. And what happens is it just keeps on going. It never comes through. And this happens sometimes. So let's see if anybody else can get in. Let's try Sister 4. See if this works. See if so it must be on Brenda's end, not so Sister 4 is here. Were you just coming up to check it out, or were you coming up to actually say something as well?
Out. And I do agree with you that I don't think anything's going to happen as far as the.
Because I can't hear Sister 4. Can anybody hear the guest? I can't hear the guest.
Can they hear?
Let's see if I can bring up Cat 2 here. It's never fun when TikTok has technical problems.
Oh wow.
I can hear her.
Yeah, by the way, if there's anybody here
And I can hear
moderating,
Kat.
please don't block people in the chat. I mean, unless somebody does something really, really, really over the top, like says
Yeah,
something
you may have
horrific,
to reboot. That may be it.
then you can block them. But I don't, for the
Yeah.
most part, like blocking anybody, even if they're annoying and I
hear you
disagree
too,
with
Kat.
them, because
Yeah, I think he needs to
I don't like
restart.
people doing that to me. So
Yep.
somebody says they can hear Brenda. Sister 4, can people hear Sister 4? Because I can't hear her.
Testing. I'm pretty
All right,
sure
so
they can.
here's what I'd have to do. If you all
Yep,
want,
they can hear us.
if you want me to be able to talk to guests, which I'd love to do, I'm going to have to restart the live because for whatever reason, as a host, I can't hear anybody.
That's a good option.
So if you all want me to do that, I can do that. It's going to take me about 30 seconds to restart it. And I hope everybody comes back in. We have 370 people here or so. And I hope you'll come back in. Just to let you know my username, in case you are not in here as somebody who follows me, you can either follow me or you can look up my name. It's just Chip Barnes 67 is my ID if you want to look me up in your search bar. Okay. So I can't hear the guest, unfortunately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart the live. It's 8:14. I'll probably be back up in about a minute. Okay. All right. Real quick. Let's see if that works, everybody. Sorry about the